On the evening of August the 12th, 1939, someone crouched beside a set of railroad tracks in the Nevada desert. They pulled the spikes from a 30-foot stretch of rail. They shoved the rail 5 inches out of alignment. They hammered the spikes back in to hold it there. Then they painted the fresh metal with brown paint, stuffed sagebrush against the outside rail to hide what they'd done, and they vanished. 4 hours later, 24 people were dead. And here's the part that should bother you. The FBI interrogated over 210,000 suspects. Southern Pacific Railroad posted a $10,000 bounty, the equivalent of nearly... By the end of this video, you'll know the 3 suspects investigators chased, the single piece of evidence that destroyed the most popular theory, and the chilling reason the case was reopened more than half a century later. This is the story of the city of San Francisco. To understand what was lost that night, you need to understand what the city of San Francisco actually was. This wasn't some commuter line or freight hauler. It was, by the standards of 1930s America, a palace on wheels. Introduced in June of 1936, the city of San Francisco was a streamlined luxury train jointly operated by 3 railroads, the Chicago and Northwestern, the Union Pacific, and the Southern Pacific. It ran the overland route from Chicago to Oakland, roughly 2,500 miles, with a ferry connection to San Francisco. The original 9-car version was so popular that by 1938 it had been replaced with a 17-car consist that cost $2 million to build. 6 900-horsepower diesel engines pushed the train to speeds over 100 miles an hour. It cut 19 hours from the fastest previous schedule on the route. Air-conditioned coaches, a 72-seat dining car, sleeping cars with names like Twin Peaks and Chinatown, a coffee shop, a buffet lounge, an observation car with a barber and a valet. Remember those sleeping cars? Twin Peaks, Chinatown. In about 10 minutes they won't exist anymore. On Saturday evening, August the 12th, the city of San Francisco was westbound for Oakland, running about half an hour behind schedule. Chief Engineer Ed Hecox, one of Southern Pacific's best, had the throttle, pushing 90 miles an hour through the Nevada desert to make up time. Passengers were finishing dinner, playing cards, sipping cocktails in the air-conditioned lounge. Outside, the last of the desert sun was fading over Palisade Canyon, where the tracks followed the Humboldt River through a narrow gorge between the towns of Bayouawe and Palisade at 9:33 p.m., roughly 1.5 miles east of a rail siding called Harney. The tracks approached Bridge Number 4, an iron span over the Humboldt River along a curve in the canyon. Hecox noticed something odd. A clump of sagebrush was lodged against the outside rail. Brush blew against tracks all the time in the Nevada desert. He thought nothing of it. Think about that for a moment. Everything that happened next, every death, every broken bone, every life altered, turned on the fact that sagebrush against a rail looked perfectly normal. The lead locomotives hit the displaced section of track and left the rails. They slid across the bridge, plowing through wooden ties and rock ballast before grinding to a stop, upright, on the far side of the river. But the coaches behind them couldn't follow that path. They snapped their connections with the engines and slammed into the old iron bridge at 90 miles an hour. Car after car jackknifed, crumpled, and several plunged off the high embankment into the riverbed below. The destruction lasted less than a minute. 24 people were dead. 121 were injured. Only 31 passengers escaped without a scratch. 5 cars were destroyed entirely: the Presidio, the Mission Dolores, the Embarcadero, and those 2 sleepers, Twin Peaks and Chinatown. Gone. Hecox survived. He climbed from the wreckage and ran to the telephone at the Harney siding to call for help. Volunteers from the nearby towns of Bayouawe and Carlin rushed to the canyon with whatever medical supplies they could carry. 24 people were dead. 121 were injured. Only 31 passengers escaped without a scratch. 5 cars were destroyed entirely: the Presidio, the Mission Dolores, the Embarcadero, and those 2 sleepers, Twin Peaks and Chinatown. gone. Heacock survived. He climbed from the wreckage and ran to the telephone at the Harney siding to call for help. Volunteers from the nearby towns of Bayawawe and Carlin rushed to the canyon with whatever medical supplies they could carry. Divers searching the Humboldt River found tools beneath the bridge. Dan O'Connell, Southern Pacific's chief special agent, examined the point of derailment and laid out the evidence. Someone had pulled the spikes from a 30-foot section of rail, forced the rail roughly 5 inches inward, then driven the spikes back in to hold the misalignment. They'd painted the exposed metal with brown paint to disguise the fresh marks, and they'd wedged sagebrush against the rail as camouflage. But here's the detail that changes everything, and the one the investigators kept coming back to. Whoever did this had also bypassed the track circuits. Those circuits were an electrical safety system. If a rail broke or shifted, the circuit would open, and the signaling system would automatically warn approaching trains. The saboteur didn't just move the rail, they made sure nobody would know it had been moved. That requires specific knowledge of how railroads work. Keep that in your mind. It eliminates one of the 3 suspects entirely. Southern Pacific posted a $5,000 reward, eventually doubling it to $10,000, a fortune in Depression-era America. The FBI entered the investigation. Dan O'Connell estimated it would take a strong person about an hour to do the work, using several heavy tools. A reenactment staged for the San Francisco Chronicle required 4 heavy tools. The previous train had passed through the area 4 hours before the derailment, which meant the saboteur had a window of roughly 4 hours to work alone in the dark, in a remote desert canyon, then disappear. So who were the suspects? The first theory, the one investigators chased hardest in those early weeks, was drifters. It was 1939, the tail end of the Great Depression. Hobo camps dotted the rail lines across the American West. Transients rode the trains, slept beside the tracks, and occasionally had violent confrontations with railroad security. 26 men were arrested near the site in the days after the wreck. Every one of them was questioned and released. Then came the most dramatic lead of the entire investigation. Witnesses reported that in the days before the wreck, a man with distinctive mangled ears had been seen lurking near the tracks in the area. Agents found a transient matching that description and arrested him. The case seemed close to breaking, but his alibi placed him 300 miles away on the night of August the 12th. He was cleared. Over the following 6 months, O'Connell's team interrogated 93,110 men. That is not a typo. 93,000. The investigation was the largest manhunt in Southern Pacific's history, and it produced nothing. No confession, no credible lead, no arrest. When the Second World War broke out, agents were pulled off active pursuit. But O'Connell never stopped. By the time he retired in 1944, he and his men had interviewed or studied reports on 210,437 suspects. The $10,000 reward was never claimed. Now let's eliminate the first suspect, the drifters. Could a random hobo have done this? Think back to the bypassed track circuits. That wasn't the work of someone who stumbled across the tracks with a grudge and a crowbar. It required knowledge of electrical signaling systems, how to keep the circuit closed while the rail was moved, so no warning reached the signal towers. A drifter sleeping under a bridge doesn't know how to do that. The physical evidence rules out an opportunistic act by a stranger. Which brings us to suspect number 2. And this one didn't come from the investigators. It came from the newspapers. Almost immediately, the media began promoting an alternative theory. Maybe there was no saboteur at all. Maybe Southern Pacific had invented the sabotage story to cover up its own negligence. The argument went like this. Ed Haycox was driving the train at 90 miles an hour. Passengers had complained that the train was swaying dangerously on curves. Some reported that beer bottles were shaking off tables in the lounge car minutes before the crash. An employee group publicly hinted the roadbed was unfit for that kind of speed. The Los Angeles Daily News ran the theory prominently. Other papers followed. Was Southern Pacific lying? It's a fair question, and the railroad didn't exactly help its own credibility in the aftermath. They played hardball with the victims. One passenger, a man named F.S. Foote, suffered a broken jaw, a broken sternum, 4 cracked ribs, a brain concussion, internal hemorrhaging, and a punctured lung. Southern Pacific paid him $7,500, barely enough to cover his medical bills. Then they sent him an additional $5, representing a refund of his premium fare, with a note that read, in essence, "We're refunding the full amount of the extra fare due to the interruption to our service, and we trust we shall have the pleasure of serving you in the future." The man nearly died in their train, and they sent him a $5 refund with a form letter. But here's why the cover-up theory doesn't hold. It wasn't just Southern Pacific claiming sabotage. The FBI independently investigated and reached the same conclusion. The physical evidence was unambiguous. The rail had been moved, respiked, painted, and camouflaged. Tools were recovered from the river. The track circuits were bypassed with deliberate wiring. No amount of excessive speed produces those conditions. A lawsuit filed by passengers named Waller alleged that SP employees had manufactured the sabotage evidence. The presiding judge cited the FBI's detailed independent investigation and dismissed the claim. So suspect number 2, negligence disguised as sabotage, falls apart under the weight of the physical evidence. 2 down, which leaves the third suspect. And this is the one the evidence actually supports, even though investigators could never prove it. A disgruntled railroad insider. Think about what the saboteur knew. They knew how to pull and reset rail spikes. They knew exactly what section of track to target. A curve on a high embankment approaching a river bridge, where a derailment would be catastrophic rather than just an inconvenience. They knew the train schedule well enough to work within the 4-hour window between trains. And they knew how to bypass track circuits, the single most damning piece of technical knowledge in the entire case. This was someone who understood railroads from the inside, someone with the skills, the access, and the knowledge to turn the city of San Francisco into a weapon against itself. O'Connell and the FBI believed this, but believing it and proving it are different problems. The suspect pool for current or former railroad employee with a grievance in 1939 was vast. Southern Pacific alone employed tens of thousands of workers. The Depression had created legions of laid-off, embittered former railroaders, and whoever did this was careful enough to leave no witnesses, no fingerprints on the tools, and no trail. The investigation never narrowed it further. The case went cold. And it stayed cold for 56 years, until it happened again. On October the 9th, 1995, Amtrak's Sunset Limited was heading west through the Arizona desert when it derailed near Palo Verde, about 60 miles south of Phoenix. 2 locomotives and 8 of 12 cars left the tracks. 4 cars fell 30 feet off a trestle bridge into a dry riverbed. 1 crew member, a sleeping car attendant named Mitchell Bates, was killed. 78 people were injured. Investigators found the cause immediately. The rails had been shifted out of alignment, and the track circuits had been bypassed with wires. The method was identical to the 1939 derailment. Same technique. Same type of location. A bridge with a high embankment. Same railroad company's tracks. And here's the detail that made the FBI's blood run cold. 1 week before the Arizona crash, the Southern Pacific Historical and Technical Society had published a detailed article about the 1939 City of San Francisco derailment in their magazine. 1 week. The FBI investigated everyone involved in the publication of that article. They found no connection between the 2 crimes. 4 typewritten notes were recovered near the Arizona crash site, signed by a group calling themselves the Sons of the Gestapo. The FBI now believes that group was fictitious, likely invented to mislead investigators. The Arizona case, like the Nevada case before it, remains unsolved. 2 derailments, 2 acts of sabotage, the same method, the same railroad's tracks, 56 years apart. Neither one solved. The bridge where the city of San Francisco went off the rails doesn't exist anymore. Sometime after the wreck, the Humboldt River was rechanneled, and the tracks were realigned. If you drive through Palisade Canyon today, there's nothing at the site to tell you that 24 people died there on a Saturday night in August of 1939. No marker, no memorial. Just the river, the canyon walls, and the tracks, still carrying trains through the Nevada desert. 87 years later. Someone pulled the spikes. Someone bypassed the circuits. Someone painted the rail and stuffed sagebrush against it and walked away into a desert night. 210,000 suspects were investigated. Not one was charged. The $10,000 reward was never claimed. And the only theory the evidence supports, a railroad insider with the knowledge and the motive, was never proven. If stories like this deserve to be remembered, if the 24 people who died on the city of San Francisco deserve more than a forgotten file in the Southern Pacific archives, consider subscribing. Because this channel exists to tell the stories that the railroads hoped would stay buried. Here's my question for you. If the saboteur was a railroad insider, someone with the knowledge and the tools and the grievance, why target a passenger train full of civilians? Why not a freight train or the tracks during a time when no train was due? Was the goal to kill, or was the goal to destroy the railroad's reputation, and the killing was the cost they were willing to pay? Drop your theory in the comments. And if the 1939 sabotage unsettled you, the story of the 1995 Palo Verde derailment goes even deeper. A copycat theory, a fictitious terrorist group, and an investigation that hit the same wall. That one's coming soon.